Well, welcome. So excited that you have joined me again here with the Relationship Doctor broadcast. Listen, we just want to help you, whether you are a couple, we help hurting couples heal, or if you're a single person preparing for marriage. Today, we're going to focus on single people preparing for marriage. You see that heart back there? Yep, that's yours in the sunset. You and your presumptive significant other. One of the reasons why you may not quite be at the don 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 stage, we're going to go over. We're on number 3, that is part 3 of our session, 5+ reasons why you are not married. Now I want to invite you early on into a Facebook group. It's free to join, and there it is. I'll keep that up for a while. It's just simply the Relationship Doctor once you get to Facebook, and then click on groups. And over there, we're going to be doing some mastermind stuff, some classes and things of this nature to give you deeper insights into how to move beyond it. Today, we're posing the challenges to perhaps make you aware of them with some solutions, but we really go deep with our masterminds, and we'd like for you to become a part of that. So today, we're on number 3. And number 3, the third reason in the 5+ reasons, and we'll put that back up again shortly, 5+ reasons that you're not married. You ready for it? Wait for it. You ready? You're afraid. You're afraid. And perhaps that's clear. Perhaps it's deep down inside. I don't know which one it is, but I can tell you this. If you are afraid, the movie said, be very afraid. I'm not encouraging you to be afraid. I'm more encouraging you to pay attention, because there might be a good reason why you are afraid. But in case there isn't, let's go over some of the reasons why you're kind of hesitant as it specifically relates to being afraid. Check this out. Number 1, what have you seen that you don't want to duplicate? Think about that. Okay. Are there some things that you have seen in your past? Are there some relationships that you have been a part of? And you're like, you know what? I don't want nothing. I have no desire to duplicate that. Well, that's good. At least you know what not to do. But if you are afraid, and the principal reason is that you've seen bad examples, if your happiness is waiting on a good example, just find one. My wife and I have been married 38 years, and I'm thankful that we love each other. She loves me. I love her. We have a great time together. I'm leading these because I'm doing something to be a blessing to her versus encumbering her, if you will, with the work associated with setup and makeup and all of that. So off we go with what I do for us. And the reason why that's important for you to know is that you don't have to be afraid, one, to get married. And let's go into some reasons. Number 1, if you have difficulty reconstructing today compared to yesterday, it's called reconstruction relationships. And sometimes it could be called how to reconstruct a relationship. If you're still in your 20s or in your 30s or in your 40s or 50s, perhaps even in your 60s or 70s, and you are still looking back at high school or that first husband or that last relationship that you had that didn't work, the problem here is that you would struggle, if you will, if that's your deal, with reconstructing now to then. And we teach that in the masterclass. How do you reconstruct a relationship? There are people who look at things differently, and it could be that the perspective is all that needs to be triggered or engaged or upgraded. So reconstruction relationships is very, very important. Some people see or saw the accident this way. Other people saw the accident that way. However you reconstruct has a lot to do with how you move forward. And if you're still afraid because of the way it was with whomever it was, then why is this person having to pay for the mistakes that he did not make? I'm talking to ladies here in this context. Number 2 is repositioning the picture. All right. So I don't know if you are an A personality or on the DISC profile, the DISC. Normally it's the S and C's, the people who are very conscientious, who look at dots on walls or dots on pictures. The way you frame things up may not always be the way that it is, but the way that it is perceived. because the positioning always puts you at a deficit. And sometimes that's a protection measure because you don't want to duplicate it again. And so what you end up doing is you make sure that nothing goes wrong. So you position yourself in case there's the threat of any form of pain, and then you're out of there. Listen, when it comes down to repositioning the picture, if it's always half full for you, you're probably afraid to duplicate the past. And because of that, you're constantly protecting yourself from loss. Listen, if that's what you're attracting, then it's no wonder that you have to protect yourself. We'll talk about that later in the mastermind, because when we get together on this, the way you frame that picture up, that's the reason it's called a picture frame. The frame, we know, has to look nice. Here in America, we look at that kind of action for decor. But when you talk about the reality, it's the picture. Remember, it's a picture frame. It's the frame or the framing of a picture. And if you picture yourself always losing, always having to pick up the pieces, always having to do better because, guys just don't, you're in the wrong pool, fishing for the wrong fish. We got to recognize, if this is you, how to reposition the picture in the frame. Okay, number 3, if in fact you're afraid and you don't want to duplicate the past, it's restarting the tape. I don't know if you're a sports person or not, if you like it, like basketball, football, baseball, but all of them these days have a rewind feature where these cats are so quick with the technology. I mean, a play that just occurred, it's already queued up and rerun, as a B-roll or whatever they're calling it these days, where they show you what just happened. Well, you saw what just happened. Yeah, but I know, but I'm going to show you again. See, they're re-rolling the tape. And you know what happens oftentimes? If it's a foul, the officials will go back and look at, here you go, the call that they made, that they are sure about because they made the call. And they look at the picture and realize, it wasn't like I really thought I saw it. See, they restarted the tape. Maybe you have to restart the tape. Sometimes it's not always them. Sometimes it's you. If you rewind the tape, maybe you run people off and you think it's them rejecting you. Maybe you're rejecting first so you won't be rejected at last. I used to do that when I was 13. And if you're 30 and you're still doing it, you got to rewind the tape. Rewind it now. I'll say that 3 times. Rewind the tape. Why? Because you got to get a good look at it. You need to look at, I know I made that call. In other words, that's what I said, but that's not really what happened. When you look at the tape, maybe it's you. And if it's you, the world doesn't end. You just grew. If it's you, the world doesn't end. I'm rewinding the tape. You just grew. Growing is required in a relationship. And you know who has to grow the most? You. You're not waiting on him to grow. I'm talking to ladies here. You're not waiting on him to get right. He might not ever get right. All he wants is the comfort that you make him feel. And make Michael Jackson. That's a whole part of our coaching program. The way you make me feel. I play the music in the whole 9 yards. Because the idea of feeling is often connected to truth. And feelings can lie to you. They can lie to you. They're just telling you about what you feel. They're not the barometer of truth. They're telling you what you feel. So you can't even trust feelings sometimes, because sometimes we feel the wrong thing. But feelings are there to tell you whether in you there's a red light, there's a green light, or there is a yellow light. Again, we go over this in the coaching program. It's very, very powerful to help you unpack your own soul. We call it under the hood work. All right, so if you are afraid, we just told you that you don't want to duplicate something you've already seen, and we went over those 3 ways that it could manifest itself. Let's move on to the second item within this part 3 version of why you're not married yet. And it is this: who loses if you get married? That is a question that you have to ask. We work with people, coaches. We coach couples, and we also coach people who are preparing for marriage. And I'm presuming that's you in this mastermind or in this broadcast now. Listen, when it comes down to being concerned about who loses, I've seen situations, and there's a verse for that. It says, a man should leave his father and his mother and cleave unto his own wife, and the two become one flesh. Now, I love my mama. I did. She's in heaven now. And they taught me well. My mother and my father taught me well, taught all of us well. And so when it was time to get married, guess what I did? I left. Well, of course I did. Yeah, but some people don't. They may leave home, but they're still connected in a way. I'm not telling you not to love your mother and your father. You ought to. It's the first commandment with the promise if you want to live long. But the point that I'm making is sometimes people are afraid of losing a parent because they're gaining a spouse. And it's subtle, it's real. And if it's real in you, you're not getting married because there's a part in you that makes you think that somebody loses if you get married, especially if you're talking single parents. And I'm talking mainly single mothers, because if the mother does not have a husband and you've been the dad, you've been sort of the man, and now you're marrying another woman or a woman, and now mom is kind of displaced and you don't want mom to feel that way, you might not want to attract, I'm talking to men now, a lady. But if you're a lady not wanting to leave your mother, then it will be very difficult for you to get married. Deep inside, you have a very compelling reason that you're not getting married. So every relationship runs up to a point and it stops. It stops right in its tracks because you're afraid of who you're going to lose or who's going to lose in the event that you get married. I know you got to dig inside to see if that's your situation. And so therefore it makes it tough to go forward because you keep looking backwards. I don't know if you have ever tried beyond backing out to drive a car forward, constantly looking in the rearview mirror. Of course, you got to check it because you got to see who's back there and what's happening, especially if you are about to make a turn. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going straight, but you keep looking backwards, you may be looking backwards at another relationship that somebody else is connected to. In other words, that guy married that girl. And what does she have on you? You might be thinking. Or what's wrong with you? You might be thinking. See, looking back and trying to go forward is a recipe for staying away from the altar. If you are trying to stay away from the altar, you're already practicing the habit of looking back on what could have been, what would have been. Listen, you got to recognize that what is in front of you right now, what's available, is not behind you. Honestly, it's not even so much what's ahead of you, it's what's in you. What's happening right now in your life? Because we know some people who have had the infatuation with a person that they met one time and they never got to see them again because they were superstars or they were stars. And they're all over the world. But this person thinks, just like the Michael Jackson syndrome, the girls I knew all went through it. He's on stage and they're in the audience crying, oh, he spoke to me. That's because high emotional capital was spent for a song that he sang that took them somewhere, and now they see him in person, and they fall out. Okay, so the deal here is they're looking backwards at the concert thinking Mike's going to show up at their house. Ding dong. DoorDash. Oh, I thought it was Mike. It's not Mike. It will never be Mike. Well, outside of the fact that Michael Jackson is no longer on the planet, but you get the point. Back then, who is your Michael Jackson today? Who is the person that you're still waiting to show up on your text message with I got your back, yeah song, or something that would indicate to you that there's a reason for hope? Listen, you cannot move forward looking backwards. Just get it. Get the revelation. You cannot move forward, say it with me, looking backwards. Say it again. I cannot move forward looking backwards. And so in that instance, that person is still afraid. They're afraid of current relationships, so it's safer to connect emotionally in a relationship that never will be, that perhaps never was. And if it was, it's not now, because the looking back cannot accomplish what present day actions can. Of course, you ought to look back in the past and see things you've done differently. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who cannot move forward to the altar because deep in their heart, they're still looking back. Let's move on to number two in this context is give yourself permission. And that's really why people keep looking back. They haven't given themselves permission to look forward. I remember when my father passed, and my wife and I, at some point way beyond the funeral and just all that goes with that, the grief and the mourning and the adjustment. My mom lived in a different state than I did, and my wife and I were on vacation at this given time, and she just wanted to talk. Nobody's at home now. The people are all gone. And so I had to give myself permission. First of all, I'm going to talk to my mother, right? Because she's not feeling well. I mean, emotionally. And so I talked with her and, just forget my vacation right now. Forget my vacation. Let me just love on by listening to my mother. And we weren't talking about much of anything because it wasn't the point of the topic. It was the point of healing. And so showing compassion to my mother, which is why I'm on here now trying to help you, because she imparted some things that helped me to recognize that when people make bad decisions, they cry a lot. Now, the one time that she cried, it wasn't because of a bad marriage decision. It was a bad financial decision, which I didn't know at the time. But at the end of the day, I'm consoling my mother, my sister and I were consoling. Don't cry, mama. Don't cry. And so it's in me now. Girls shouldn't cry at night. Well, what makes girls cry at night isn't not getting your way necessarily. What makes girls cry at night oftentimes is that they are with the wrong person and emotionally they're being damaged over and over again or repetitively or whatever kind of cycle. To help you avoid that, do not get to that altar until your heart is prepared for that. And when it comes down to giving yourself permission to move on, my mother had to ultimately learn to do that. And she did, paid the house off, and the list goes on. And off she went. Well, what about you? If you are a divorcee, a double divorcee, a triple divorcee, maybe you got married at 14, like in a state I won't mention because I don't want to throw shade on anybody. But back in the old country days, people got married when they were young. They were a lot more mature as well. But let's say you got married early and it didn't last, a Vegas wedding. And then you got married for real. That's marriage number 2. It lasted a year. Marriage number 3, man, 3 years in, no children. Maybe you have children. Marriage number 4, you're like, man, I don't know. You hopefully have learned a lot. Looked in the mirror. I don't know why we're on the Michael Jackson theme. Man in the mirror. How about one man in the mirror? And see if it's you and if you're still attracting that former version. But the point is, when it's time to move beyond where you are, you got to give yourself permission. You got to give yourself a yes to move beyond the pain of the past. And look, don't ever get into this mode of, bump this. In other words, if you're not healed in your heart, what you say out of your mouth does not fix the issue. The issue in your heart has got to be fixed that you really can move on into more, move on into better. Because if you can't, you're not moving on, you're just treading. You're on a Peloton, just riding, like the Allstate guy said, on a trip to nowhere. Well, you're still getting cardio. I get what he's saying. His point and my point to you is you must give yourself permission to move on. Can you do that? Number 3, under item number 2. If you're worried that somebody loses if you get married, this is the major point. We're under the sub point of it's tough to move forward looking backwards, and then you got to give yourself permission. Well, the third point under these is forgiveness is key. Now, y'all, we could honestly talk about this for the rest of our time, not just now, but in the next session, in the next session, and in the next session, because forgiveness is so vital to how you exist. If you exist as an unforgiving, bitter woman, you're only going to attract the same thing in the person of the man. Now, he might be kind or gentle or sweet, but you're going to find a way to be you if bitterness is a good definition of who you are. Look, this is enough to tell your girlfriends and them, because some of y'all know some, and they need to be in this mastermind that we're having. I'll tell you when it's going to happen. But in the meantime, just jump in the Facebook group. We're not in there complaining and all that kind of thing. But I'm telling you, if you have bitterness inside of your heart, you're in unforgiveness. And forgiveness is the key if you're going to move beyond the idea of somebody losing because you get married. You do realize that there is a normal behavior of self-sabotage. You know that, don't you? You know that the thing you did before over in that relationship that he didn't know about because you didn't tell him, and now you bring you into the relationship and you cannot believe that you did here what you did there. Can't believe it. Well, guess who the common denominator is? Correct. It's you. Well, why are you the common denominator when you know you want this to work? You know you're tired of always, messing up right at the end, or you barely did anything and he left. Forgiveness is the key. Now, I won't go super deep, but I'll go this far. Forgiveness is described as the ability to cut. Not cut a person, cut a thing. Cut a thing like cut a string. The umbilical cord has to get cut. You know why that's very important for that baby and for the mother? Because now the baby's out. Where it used to live, it existed in an environment conducive for its season. But when the baby came outside of that environment, I hope you're hearing this, when the baby came out from the environment of the womb and the warm protection of the mother, now the baby is living in a different environment. If the cord didn't get cut, the baby could not survive. The mother could not survive because there is a merging of two environments. The cord would have kept that child connected to the former environment, which would have prohibited them from living in the current environment. And so we got to do something. You got to cut the cord. That's what AT&T and them said. Or who was that? No, it's Dish. Dish told us cut the cord. Cut cable. You got to cut the cable. You got to cut it. It's an Aramaic word that pronounced shaw. You got to shaw that thing. You got to cut that thing. Because if you don't cut it, you can't live in the past. You can't move forward into your present, stuck in existences. That's what forgiveness does. You cut the past, the ties to it, which are all emotional. They're all mental. They're experiential. They're in your memory. And if you don't cut that cord, you can't exist today because you're existing in two environments, just like that baby. In order for you to get that done, you got to do that. We talk about this again when we get inside of the coaching program or in a mastermind, because it's time for you to move to the altar and not move there with a cord that's still connected. You got to cut the cord. So that is a huge reason why you think, if you do think this way, that somebody loses if you get married. Difficult to cut the cord. Got to give yourself permission. Got to stop looking back, trying to go forward. Okay, the third item here is if you are not yet married. And I think in this context, you got to look at the area of fear to see if you are afraid to get married. Number 3, and I'm doing 3 sections under each of these, is review the history that you don't want. Now, let's go back. Let's review the history that you don't want. Look at all of this, okay? So once again, if you are afraid, you've seen something that you don't want to duplicate. Number 2, you got to ask the question, does somebody lose if you get married? And number 3, take a look at your history and review what you don't want. Okay, so oftentimes when we work with people and we ask, so what do you want? The easier list for them is to say what they don't want. That's not bad, but that's telling. What is it telling me? Well, it's telling me that it is easier to go negative first than positive. Well, that's an environmental issue. You don't need an environmentalist for this, but I will tell you, if your environment is always a half full reckoning, or you're reconstructing the relationship to where you are as half full, then it's going to be difficult for you to move beyond that until you change it. Check this out. If you start looking at the past, you grew without knowing it. If you look at your past, from wherever it was you were first hurt, or second hurt, or third hurt, or you hurt again, you grew without knowing it. What are you talking about? Everything starts with seeds. Everything. The plant life, the let there be light life, your life, my life. So if you look at your past and look at how you arrived at your present, it is not disconnected. It is totally connected with what you think, because as a person thinks in their heart, so are they. So you are the sum total of how you've been growing based upon the seeds you've been sowing. You put that together and there's no mystery when you review the history that you don't want to repeat. Stop sowing the seeds that bring you to this point. Sow some new ones. It will take you to another point. I tell people often, your faith is strong. And I'm not talking about a banner or a badge. Your faith got you here. Faith being confidence, faith being belief, trust. Your trust got you here. Well, I don't like where I am. Then start having faith for something else. When you start believing differently, you'll start receiving differently. It really does work that way. It's not difficult. So if you review the history that you don't want, if we start there, let's just take a look at how you've been growing. And then number 2, in this 3-part section of number 3, you're stronger than you know. Listen, if you've had a bad relationship or multiple bad relationships and you're still alive, you haven't, taken matters into your own hands to end your existence, you're probably stronger than you know. In fact, if you look back in your history at how many bad scenarios you've been in, you might just want to take a look at how strong you are in spite of what you've come through. In fact, it is possible, reconstruction relationships, that you literally have gotten stronger because of the pain. And now you can help other people, help yourself as well. See, this might be the reason that you are not at the altar, because if you're afraid, I want to help you with a little bit. Maybe, just maybe, consider you are stronger than ever before. You're stronger than you were. Because if you weren't, you'd be done. And sometimes getting done does not mean you're done. It just simply means it's now time. Ding. See, being done when the oven finally has revealed that it's ready, that doesn't mean you're never going to cook again. You're just not going to cook that again. See, you're stronger than you may think you are. And I hope you use that strength to recognize that you can actually make it to the altar. See, if we're talking about 5 reasons that you're not married yet, one of them could be that it took the time for you to get strong. And now perhaps if you are ready, now you can move forward with that. I hope this is not some pseudo confirmation kind of thing. I'm just telling you a process, okay? Because you got to get a whole lot more confirmation than just, I knew it. He said I'm stronger. No, you. Okay, number 3, 3A or 3ABC, number C or item C, bitter to better. Bitter to better. We're going to end it here. Bitter to better with just a few minutes left. How do you go from bitter to better? Lemons to lemonade. How do you go from rags to riches? Metaphorically speaking, in terms of marriage. Well, let's talk about one thing real quick. If you have ever taken lemons, and we teach this, if you've ever taken lemons and looked at it, you are absolutely not going to get anything from it just by looking at it. So if you look at your life and just look at your life, and perhaps you want to get married, but you just keep looking at your life, if you're going to get something out of your life, like out of a lemon, you got to do something. I'm not talking about with an actual knife with you. I'm talking about with a proverbial knife. In other words, in reality, until we cut the lemon, until we open our heart, we really can't see what's in there. And if we can't see what's in there, it's difficult to go from one stage to the next stage. So what we do with the lemon is we cut that lemon, we open that lemon up, but looking at it still won't get the refreshment of lemonade, if that's what we're after here. Right now, straight lemon is going to be quite bitter, unless that's what you need for a cleanse. That's a whole nother other topic. But let's just deal with the fact that you're going to squeeze that, seed's going to come out, which means the future is inside of some of the press. Some of what you're going through, you being squeezed because the process of turning lemons to lemonade is underway. There is so much I want to go over just right there, but I'm out of time. And you got to join me in the mastermind. I'd encourage you to get some free resources at calvintibbs.com. You're going to see a free resource that you can pick up there. And you can also go to the Facebook page, again, that is dedicated for relationships at the Relationship Doctor. And also, in the event that you want a free strategy session, you can go to Calendly and book one in the times that are available. And we can just talk. I set it for 45 minutes. It don't need to take that long. My calendar is off. It should have been 15 or 20 minutes, but however much time we need, we'll set that and we'll talk. And then we'll see which direction we can help you best in. But in the meantime, I hope this helped you. I hope this helped you with the 5+ reasons that you are not married. Remember to go ahead and get connected over there in those various places. Been Dr. Calvin Tibbs, Relationship Doctor, hoping to help your cause get better and brighter every day. We'll see you next time. Bye. Have a great, great day.